This is Art Television.
Coming up, State of Business, sponsored by
IWS Aviation.
A very good evening and a warm welcome to State of Business on Art Television. I'm Ashine Ali and let's have a look at the headlines first. India extends cumulative support over $2.5 billion during the first quarter of 2022. Government plans to grant 5-year visas for investors doing business in Sri Lanka. News in detail. A consignment of 40,000 metric tons of diesel under Indian assistance through a line of credit of $500 million was recently handed over by High Commissioner Gopal Bagle. This is the fourth consignment under the fuel line of credit, with previous deliveries on 16th March, 20th March and 23rd March respectively. With today's consignment, the total fuel delivered to the people of Sri Lanka over the last 50 days amounts to nearly 200,000 metric tons, including a consignment of 40,000 metric tons by Indian Oil Corporation outside the line of credit facility in February 2022. The Export-Import Bank of India and the government of Sri Lanka signed a $500 million line of credit agreement for purchase of petroleum products on the 2nd February of this year. The agreement was signed by Treasury Secretary S.R. Artigala and Chief General Manager of the Indian Exim Bank, Mr. Gaurav Bhandari. Further, in response to a separate and urgent request from the government of Sri Lanka, extension of a credit facility of $1 billion for supply of essential items including food and medicines has been finalized, and the first shipments of rice under this facility is expected to reach Sri Lanka soon. Early in January this year, India has approved financial assistance to Sri Lanka that included a credit swap of $400 million and deferment of an Asian Clearing Union payment of over $515 million. In cumulative terms, Indian support to the people of Sri Lanka in the first quarter of 2022 is in excess of $2.5 billion. The government of India also continues to encourage efforts towards medium to long-term capacity creation through enhanced Indian investment in Sri Lanka in key sectors that include ports, renewable energy and manufacturing. The External Sector Performance Report released by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka showed that import expenditure has continued to expand. This occurred in spite of high earnings from export, which exceeded $1 billion for the 8th consecutive month. This import expenditure expansion has widened the deficit in the trade account in January 2022 compared to January 2021. Tourist arrivals showed notable recovery in January 2022 over the same month in the previous year, while moderation of workers' remittances was observed in January 2022. Sri Lanka successfully settled in the international sovereign bond of $500 million in January 2022. The financial account of the balance of payments strengthened during the month with the receipt of SAC Finance Swap facility from the Reserve Bank of India. The weighted average spot exchange rate, which remained in Rs 200-203 range in January, adjusted upwards with greater flexibility allowed in the exchange rate with effect from 7th March 2022. Earnings from the exports of industrial goods increased by 21.6% in January 2022 compared to January 2021, with broad-based increase was reported in almost all subcategories of industrial goods, mainly in garments and petroleum products. Total earnings from the export of agricultural goods in January 2022 increased by 2.3% compared to January 2021, primarily due to the increase in export earnings from coconut, seafood and minor agricultural products. As the central bank allowed greater flexibility in the exchange rate, a notable upward adjustment in the exchange rate is observed since March 2022. During the year up to 1st of April 2022, the rupee recorded a depreciation of 33% against the US dollar. Reflecting cross-currency movements, Sri Lanka rupee depreciated against the euro, the pound sterling, Japanese yen, the Australian dollar and the Indian rupee during the year up to 1st April 2022. State Minister of Aviation Export Zones Development D.V. Chanaka says that the government has decided to grant 5-year visas for investors and shareholders doing business in Sri Lanka. State Minister Chanaka made this announcement on investor visas while addressing the 41st AGM of the Free Trade Zone Manufacturers Association in Colombo. The State Minister said that the government arrived at its decision after considering the investors' request to ease the visas process as they had to engage in a convoluted renewal process each year. He added that VIP Silk Route services for VIP investors at the BIA and visiting business partners and colleagues has been made available. The BOI will be introducing an investor facilitation center where the investor will deal with all BOI departments through one portal, including the relevant line agencies if necessary. The government is working on a plan to provide zonal land at discounted rates to existing investors in an attempt to encourage BOI companies to expand and is the first of many initiatives to encourage reinvestment and strengthening of local manufacturers, according to State Minister Chanaka. And export processing zones are significant rows of foreign exchange and employ around 500,000 people. The minister stated that they will be provided with uninterrupted energy and other essentials. With the economy gradually recovering along with the decline of the pandemic, export earnings have risen with revenue generated by BOI enterprise surpassing that in 2019. According to the State Minister, 15 of the 23 export sectors listed under the Board of Investment have grown in comparison to figures from 2019. Industries reporting double-digit growth during this period have been textiles and fabrics, rubber, electronics, industrial chemicals, food processing, petroleum, plastic, coal and transport equipment. Stay tuned for more news right after this commercial break.
Sponsored by
Welcome back after the break. The Ceylon Chamber of Commerce is gravely concerned about the far-reaching adverse consequences of certain actions being taken by the government on economic activity. These government actions of concern are actions regarding tourism, trade, exports and e-commerce dependent on social media platforms. The Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, while appreciating the need to maintain law and order and public security in the country, is concerned about the adverse coverage Sri Lanka is getting on international media. Of particularly importance is the imposition of a state of emergency which can cause serious damage at a time when the tourism sector is just beginning to stage a recovery. The impact of these restrictions on the freedom of speech and other fundamental rights of the people can damage the reputation of Sri Lanka at a time when Sri Lanka needs the goodwill of the international community to recover from its current economic challenges. Ceylon Chamber also requests the authorities responsible for the availability of fuel, electricity and gas to communicate clearly on the current status, which is of immediate concern to both businesses and the public at large, particularly if improvement can be expected in the near future. The Chamber has also made 7 short and 2 medium to long-term recommendations towards addressing this energy crisis. U.S. Ambassador Julie Chang joined several other heads of missions in Colombo to call on the government to respect the people's right to peaceful protests. Ambassador Chang said on Twitter that Sri Lankans have a right to protest peacefully for democratic expression. Canadian High Commissioner David McKinnon said that the freedom of expression and the right to peaceful protest are fundamental to the success of any democracy, including Sri Lanka's. The Office of the European Union expressed concern of the state of emergency and strongly urged Sri Lankan authorities to safeguard democratic rights of all citizens, including the right to free assembly and dissent, which has to be peaceful. The German ambassador Holger Subert associated himself with the sentiments of the EU and added that people demonstrating for their rights is no emergency. Several airlines have announced a drawdown or cancellation of flights to and from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is currently experiencing its worst economic crisis in history, with long lines for fuel, cooking gas essential in short supply, and long hours of power cuts. Air India recently said it will reduce its India-Sri Lanka services from 16 flights per week to 13 flights per week from on the 9th of April due to poor demand. Under the new schedule, Air India will operate 13 flights per week, while the frequency from Chennai will remain untouched. Flights from Delhi will reduce from 7 to 4 per week due to poor demand. AI 283 on the Delhi-Colombo sector will now operate on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays and Sundays from the 8th of April to the 30th of May. AI 284 on the Colombo-Delhi sector will operate on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays from April 9 to May 31st. Meanwhile, Sri Lankan Airlines announced that it is ceasing flights to Bahrain operated under flight number UL201 and UL202 with effect from the 12th of May. Operations to other destinations within its online network will continue without any change. Local news reports that the decision on Bahrain was taken due to commercial reasons. Additionally, the national carrier of Maldives, Maldivian, recently announced it has temporarily halted services to Ratmalana International Airport. The airline operated its first flight to Colombo on March 27th from Balana International Malay Airport to Ratmalana International Airport. Maldivian has said that it will not operate during Ramadan, which starts on April 2nd, and will resume scheduled flights to Colombo International Airport, Ratmalana, after Ramadan. It stated that the decision to halt operations was taken since passenger traffic will be low during the 30-day fasting period. It is with the launch of the international flight from Maldives that the Ratmalana Airport resumed international passenger operations after over 50 years. Stay tuned for stock updates.
News, views, highlights, updates and opinions. This is Wake Up with us.
Trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on a negative note today. The All Share Price Index dropped 226.88 points to close at 8,244.55, and the S&P SL 20 dropped 146.11 points to close at 2,684.82. The turnover was 1.9 billion rupees and over 98 million shares were traded. Up next are Forex Rates. And that's all news for today. See you tomorrow with State of Business at the usual time. Until then, take care and good night.
State of Business was sponsored by